and welcome to another episode of Around the Valley. We're always excited to bring these to you, so we're going to just jump right into it. As always, I'm Arshavir, Saryan, and I'm joined by Kenny Hodges. And as we've been doing with these ones, Kenny's going to drive this bus. Kenny, how you doing?
Man, fantastic as always. This week, our co-host, Kaylee Harden, she's down, but she'll be back. So it's just me and Arshavir. We're going to run through everything that happened in week 5. I think it was week 5, week 6. Doesn't matter. We are across the midway point of the season. We're knee deep in the league play in the West Valley, in the Valley Mission, in the East Valley. We are steamrolling towards the postseason, and guess what? We had some really interesting games that kind of went down this week. Birmingham handling business as they jump back into the city. We had a couple of OT thrillers in the Valley Mission, one in the West Valley, and we're going to recap it. So you know what? Without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into the West Valley, starting with the final scores. Birmingham took on Chatsworth in their league opener at home, beat them 64-0. Big time score there for Birmingham over in Granada Hills. Cleveland and Granada, a rivalry that always provides some excitement, and this game was no different. Cleveland took home the win 29-28 in OT. Also in the West Valley, El Camino and Taft, the Battle of the 101 took place over at El Camino, and Elko picks up their second win in a row after an 0-4 start, and they take down Taft 37-12. So looking at the headlines coming out of the West Valley, Elko starting to get it rolling. They've won their second straight game. Birmingham makes a statement as they jump back into the city, and Cleveland wins a thriller over Granada. So the question I'll ask you, Arshavir, after looking at the games that happened over in the West Valley, there's one big question that sort of looms. After seeing what Birmingham did to Chatsworth, we saw the battle that happened with Cleveland and Granada. Elko starting to look a little bit more like themselves, like they're finding their traction. But the question is there anybody in this league that is built to give the Pats trouble this season in the West Valley?
It could be Cleveland. They've got a very well-rounded team this year. And you know, they showed some real fight in that overtime game against Granada. It was what you would expect of a team that decides that they want to do big things. Just took it to them. They held Granada scoreless the entire second half. So they would probably be the closest in my view.
Yeah, it was interesting because that was one of those things when you watch how that first half was sort of unfolding, you couldn't help but think like, oh man, this looks like what we had seen from Granada the last couple of years. That Veer just gives everybody a lot of issues. It makes you question if you really like playing football because it's assignment football over and over and over again, and you know what's coming. And it felt like Cleveland, it took a while for them to sort of find their traction in that game, but once they did, they really turned the game around. That balance sort of started to show up, and they pulled out a close win in overtime. So I tend to agree. I think Cleveland is the team that if you just look at teams that are more balanced, who could kind of force Birmingham to kind of sort of not get out of that mode of you just have to chase Birmingham and do what they do. But Elko, this is going to be interesting. We'll kind of get into that when we get to the look ahead part. But Elko, now after the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about what the season would be for Elko, you're now starting to see that the seniors are really starting to step up. That was a professional victory, if you can say that about high school kids, in terms of how buttoned up it was in all phases for Elko on Friday night against Taft. So it gives you a little bit of hope that when they see Birmingham, that maybe they can give them a game too. It's just, I'll ask you another question. That game against Chatsworth, is that more of an anomaly and Birmingham just had it going, just had it cooking? Like I said, they put up 43 in the first half. Everything just kind of went right and fell into place. Was that more of an anomaly, or is Birmingham really that dominant?
Birmingham has been that dominant in previous seasons. Now, what we've questioned is, was that still there, right? They had issues in their secondary. There was, how does their defense cope? And honestly, I think they just came out and put a statement win, and that's what it was. Some games are those, and there's moments in these games where early on you kind of take a team's heart, and I honestly think that's kind of what happened in that game. Chatsworth did what Chatsworth does, and kept going till the end. But when a team takes your heart, it's kind of like a walking zombie at that point.
Like, I just think when you watching that game sort of unfold, they got smacked in the mouth so quickly. You could just tell that Chatsworth was just sort of off kilter in terms of what they were trying to do. And once you get into a point where you're trying to chase a game because you get down so quickly that way, it all kind of just sort of falls apart. So I'm with you. I wouldn't say that Birmingham is 64 points better than their opponents on a week-to-week basis now with the rest of the teams in the West Valley, especially when you're talking about Granada can just eat the clock. So you aren't going to beat them by 64 because you ain't got enough time to do it. Elko has got too many seniors to kind of like fall into that into a game that way. Same thing with Cleveland. Is the leadership in the way that these teams play. I wouldn't go that far. That feels like prisoner of the moment to kind of say that, oh man, they're just going to kill everybody. But like we talked about, it's been a long time since anybody in the city has beaten this team. And if you were going to make a statement to not just the West Valley, but the rest of the city that, hey, y'all still chasing us, that is the way to do it. So, maybe Birmingham's demise was a little bit exaggerated, but hey, they still got to play the rest of the game. So we'll leave the West Valley conversation there. Let's move on to the Valley Mission. Going through the scores from this past week's game, Sylmar with a nice tidy 31-6 victory over Canoga Park. Canoga Park still searching for their first win. Panorama handled business against Reseda. 46-12 was the final score there. And in the other game, really kind of the game of the week, if you look at the games in the Valley in terms that were played on Friday night, Van Nuys pulling the upset 36-30 over San Fernando in overtime. Big win for the Van Nuys program. Their first victory over San Fernando in 13 years. A game in which they were up 10 with under 5 to go. Kind of blew the lead, but then kind of got it together in overtime and took the victory. So, and Kennedy was the team in the Valley Mission that had a bye this week. So just recapping the headlines coming out of those weekend games. Sylmar wins their third in a row as they look to host San Fernando coming up next. Panorama gets back to 500 with another solid performance, and Van Nuys trending upward after pulling an upset in overtime over San Fernando. So before I get into the question I want to ask, let's talk a little bit about that Van Nuys program, because I do think it deserves a minute or two to kind of talk about what that team did and what in the direction that they have this program going. What does it say about Van Nuys' program that they can go into San Fernando in a game and after homecoming, ruining the homecoming, where we always talk about teams going in and putting a performance together, trying to ruin another team's homecoming? It feels good to do it. Van Nuys goes in there, wins their first game over San Fernando in nearly a decade and a half. What does it say about Van Nuys' program that they were able to do something like this?
Talked about it a few weeks earlier. The job that Ken Osorio and his staff have done is amazing and remarkable. They literally resurrected this program. And as much as the kids are on the field and it's their work that gets it done, for the time being, and as this culture is being developed over there, I give them all the credit. This is I can't say it's surprising, having seen them a couple times recently. but it's definitely kind of a message again of, hey, this is a program you got to remember is around, and they're going to do some things.
And one of the things that I also took from that game is we talk a lot about Diego Montez in the West Valley in terms of young quarterbacks, guys who still like haven't even hit their peak or their ceiling yet in terms of, because they're still juniors. This kid at quarterback for Van Nuys, this Carlos Herrera kid, he's a kid that deserves a little bit more attention in terms of what he's able to do. Like watching that Van Nuys team, they are a very fun offense to watch. They are that. If this was college football 25, this is the prototypical aired out offense. They chuck that ball up 40, 45 times a game. They spread the field out. They try to get you going all over the place. They find and they look to create mismatches, and they want to throw the ball down the field. Whereas a lot of times on a high school level, especially here in the city section, a lot of it is ground and pound, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. This is an offense that's like, no, we've got the kids, we got the receivers on the outside. Let's spread everything out and throw it all over the place. They run the ball as a means to just keep you honest, because I think they ran the ball like 12 times and threw it like 45. And that kid threw for 330, which is not easy to do against that San Fernando defense. And he's the reason why you look at the Van Nuys program and you say, not only could this team be a threat come postseason time, but this is a team that might be a threat to win that league next year, because he'll be back. I know a lot of those receivers are seniors and there's some juniors sort of mixed in, but if you got a signal caller that can kind of control the game the way he does, man, they could be dangerous down the stretch and into the future with that kid at quarterback. So the question though I really wanted to ask though, looking at what Sylmar is doing at the start of the league, we sort of laid out, I said last week they were going to be an intriguing team in the Valley Mission, because with them still having San Fernando, with them still having Kennedy coming up on the schedule, is this team a legit threat to win the Valley Mission? We know they got talent on both sides of the ball. It's still a tough task to look at the two teams that we think are at the top and think that anybody's really going to beat them. But now seeing what Van Nuys just did with San Fernando, it almost sort of feels like maybe this league is a little bit more wide open than we may have thought. If Van Nuys can beat San Fernando, maybe Sylmar is also in that same boat and can beat them as well. And then you're talking about then taking your shot at the top dog, Kennedy. So, in your opinion, do you think Sylmar is a legit threat to win the Valley Mission?
Yeah, I'm going to say yeah. I was going to hem and haw a little bit, but yeah. This is a team that has similar to what Van Nuys did. Is early in the season there were moments of kind of growing pains. And then as they got into league, it was, well, no, we're piecing it together. And they did. I mean, I saw the potential when I saw them early in the season against Chavez. That's a game they want back. A game they know they could have won. So probably should have. But it's interesting because they're entering their gauntlet portion of the season. It's San Fernando, Kennedy, Van Nuys. None of those are going to be a cakewalk. They're all going to be dogfights. This is a team that's designed to fight, and I think Friday night's going to be a really, really good and entertaining contest. I
think seeing what Van Nuys did against San Fernando really kind of opened my eyes a little bit to maybe the gulf between these teams are not as big as we may have thought coming into the year. And also, you got to also take into account what I saw from Van Nuys is a team that's sort of growing into the season. And what I'm seeing from Sylmar, I'm seeing the same thing, is that this is not the same team now in week 6 that is going into week 6, 7, 8 that they were in week 0, week 1, week 2. So taking into account all of those factors and the things that we've seen in the eye test and that, yeah, I do think that depending on what comes out of this game this weekend, we are going to be talking about a Sylmar team that potentially that next game against Kennedy is for the league title, and all bets are off at that point. And Sylmar is a team that generally gives Kennedy a hard time just because of the familiarity. So More than anything, I think it is excellent that we're getting late into the season and we're still having these conversations about the league titles not being decided, because it means a lot more fun, a lot more intrigue around the matchups, a lot more intensity around the matchups. And also, it says a lot about what these teams are going to look like, because it makes it harder to sort of predict where these teams are going to land come playoff time. Because now, not just the league title, now you're talking about these matchups maybe being important in terms of seeding and where these teams land when the playoffs do come. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch over the course of the next couple of weeks. We'll keep our eye on Silmar and see if they are the threat they appear to be. So moving into the East Valley, just to recap the scores. The game from earlier in the week that got moved to Wednesday for the Eat. Chavez shut out Fulton 20-0 at home. Poly hosted Monroe for their homecoming. They handled business against Monroe 47-12. Over in Van Nuys at Grant, North Hollywood did what they have done all season long. Had another cruising victory over Grant 33-7. And over in Arleta for their homecoming. Happy homecoming for the Mustangs as they handle business, beating Verdugo Hills 41-21. So looking at the headlines coming out of that week of action, NoHo keeps it rolling. They move to 6-0. Poly gets back on track with a nice win. Chavez handles business as they now turn their eyes towards those North Hollywood Huskies. Arleta takes care of Verdugo at homecoming, and they appear to be back on track with their eye towards the playoffs, because I haven't already lost to North Hollywood. League is sort of maybe out of their hands, but this is still a team that looks like they're trending towards being a tough team you don't want to end up being across from in the bracket come playoff time. So let's cut right to the chase. When you look at North Hollywood, they've got Chavez, Fulton, and Verdugo at home left on their schedule. Only road game they have left is at Monroe, which is a game we expect them to win without any issues. So the question, I'll put you on the hot seat. When you look at what they have left, is this team running the table? Are they going to head into the postseason 10-0? And do you think this team projects to be a top seed in D1? What do you think?
I think the answer to all of those is yes. No. Chavez is going to force them to really, really be honest. That's a defense that has given everybody fits. And, I mean, you look at what they did to the high-flying Grant defense. Right? I mean, that offense, that Grant offense. But that being said, Chavez is a team that traditionally kind of struggles to score. And North Hollywood has a suffocating defense. They've only given up 21 points all season. 14 to Arleta, 7 to Grant. Everybody else was a donut. So I don't think Chavez has the offense to overcome that defense. So this is probably like a 14-0 game. You know. But yeah, I still think North Hollywood takes it. And then, you know, Monroe is putting together pieces of the rebuild. Fulton is figuring things out at 11-man. I mean, they started pretty well, but they're starting to understand what this league is, and it's definitely, I think, something that's going to benefit them in the long run. And then Verdugo Hills, this is a team that probably believes they gave one away to Arleta 2 years in a row now, and that's not taking anything away from the Mustangs. And that was a Mustangs team that was pissed off from the week prior, or 2 weeks prior, but still, they're determined to not lose again in league. So whoever faces Arleta is going to see them pissed off Mustangs. But Verdugo Hills is interesting because when they play to their potential, I think they can challenge anybody. Because they have, especially this year, they have a young offense that has shown that when they're on, and they can really do a lot. Their defense is kind of where I hem and haw a little bit because they gave up points to Monroe. And again, not taking anything away from anyone they faced, but it's at the end of the day, you got to look at yourself, right? And if I'm the D coordinator and we gave up 21, 27 points to a team that we believe we should handily defeat, it's kind of where the question lies. But to put a bow on that, I can see North Hollywood running the table, but that final game of the season is going to be a fun one.
That game's going to be fun. I think this week is going to be fun too, because you already kind of know going into this game, and I'm sure Coach Fair is preparing the boys for what this game is going to be, because it is going to be war. Because you already know that the Chavez game plan is what we saw earlier this year, or what we see from them every week. Like I said, the reason why the Silmar team we were just talking about is 4-3 and not 5-2 is because they ran into a team of Honey Badgers in week 0 who just kept scratching and clawing at them until they managed to punch a touchdown in at the end of the game right before the final whistle, and won a game 6-3 over Silmar. Which is honestly probably the most hard-fought game that Silmar has had to deal with so far on their schedule. So, yes, it's still going to be easier said than done to shut down that North Hollywood offense, because the way, especially that line, is just mauling people. They are an ornery bunch to deal with, and trying to stop Omar Muhammad is good luck. So, but if there's a team that might be built to sort of just drag you into just a bloody, gruesome game where the clock is just running and you look up in this third quarter and nobody's scored and it's just back and forth, body blow after body blow, it's going to be Chavez. That's just how they're built. That's what they're built to do. And it's just a matter of, are those seniors at North Hollywood going to be able to kind of stay the course? They get through that without unscathed, then yeah, they're going to be favored over everybody else they play. So there's a real good shot that they're going to finish 10-0. Now, I'll ask this because this is a fun question. You look at this North Hollywood team and you look at the fact that they're probably going to be in D1. You can't play the way they played this year and not think that team is not going to end up in that mix in D1. But some of the teams we also know that are probably going to be in D1, the Clevelands, the Granadas, the Kennedys, San Fernando is, left to see where they end up now with some of the losses on their schedule. But just that first group of teams, do you think this North Hollywood team is good enough to hang with those teams that we sort of look at as like, these are solid top of D1 championship contenders? Are you putting North Hollywood in that same category with those teams?
At this moment, I can't say no. And here's why. Number one, the defense. Again, donuts basically all season. And number two is they don't need a lot to beat you. They put up 43 against Poly, right? But Poly walked out of that game with their heads held high on defense because Omar Muhammad only broke 2 runs all game. 69 yards and 37, something like that. I gotta double check my notes for that. But those were the 2 big breaks. And that's the thing. With this defense, they only need 1 or 2. And guess what? Nate Arlauskis can throw the ball. So when Omar Muhammad is pounding it 25 times a game and you expect him to get the ball, oh wait, Nate Arlauskis just went over the top because you weren't expecting it. So that's their formula, and I can see them lulling people to sleep and competing. I would put them in that lump of maybe 4 or 5 that in D1 yeah, probably should be viewed as a serious, legit contender.
They have a formula right now that works, and that's going to give anybody fits, especially if they can manage to get through the regular season. It's never easy to do in any league to finish 10-0 and to go through your entire schedule without having a bump or hiccup somewhere. So if that is the case, that probably means they probably are hosting the first couple of playoff games. And if that is the case, then you got to go through them and go to North Hollywood and try to in the postseason. Yeah, this is a team that I am looking at, and I'm not shocked, would not be shocked at all to see them in the semis, to see them end up in a D1 championship, especially if things all break the right way. So let's leave that there. Before we look ahead, just to show some love to the southern section of schools in our backyard, we'll go through the scores of the southern section action from last weekend. Notre Dame with another good win against Bishop Amat. They've got a big one coming up next week or this weekend with Sierra Canyon, who also put up a big win, 42-3 over Chaminade. Cathedral came to Alamany and put a beating on Alamany 50-6 in the Bible Bowl. Didn't get a lot of hubbub this year just because Village has been struggling, but guess what? Village said, throw all the struggles away. If there was ever going to be a week we were going to show up and play well, it's going to be against Heritage in the Bible Bowl. They come away with the 36-21 win. Burbank with a nice win over Pasadena, 33-21. Burroughs handles business, beating Hoover 47-21. And homecoming, Calabasas gets shut out on the road at Thousand Oaks, 37-zip. Crespi with a big win on the road at LaSalle, 28-26, and a close one. And Crescenta Valley with a huge big win over Glendale on the road, 45-7. So let's look ahead to this week's slate of games. We've got a big one with Chavez at North Hollywood, like we just talked about. Chatsworth looking to rebound after licking their wounds after a big loss. They go on the road to Cleveland, which is always a sort of a heated contest between those two teams. They know each other so well. Birmingham looks to keep it rolling as they go on the road at El Camino. Tough task for Elko, but Elko's looking better. Poly goes on the road to Verdugo. That's a big one in terms of the East Valley and what the outlook will be there. And probably a game that's going to say a lot for those two teams when it comes to playoff time. San Fernando's hosting Silmar. We just talked about Silmar potentially being a spoiler in the Valley Mission. So that's an interesting one there as San Fernando tries to kind of recoup from what happened at homecoming. And in the southern section, we got a big one, as I just mentioned before. Sierra Canyon on the road at Notre Dame. Big one in the Mission League there. So of all those games, Arshavir, what's the game that sort of stands out to you that you're like, that's the one that's got your danders up? Well, if you had to pick one, if I had to hold you to the flame and say there's one that's just absolute can't miss, which one are you picking for this weekend?
I don't like it when you make me pick one. Because there's 3 or 4. And, everybody listening to this right now, I'm going to give you a Thursday and a Friday night.
Okay.
Thursday night is Taft and Granada. Because Taft has been a little up and down, but so is Granada. And these are two teams that are looking at identity. And that's been a really big theme this year, with teams trying to figure out, okay, who are we? I mean, we know who we are, but on the field, do the players embrace their role in terms of who are we? So that's the one there. And on Friday night, in the middle of all that, it's Silmar San Fernando. That just speaks volumes to me.
Yeah, it is. It's tough because when you look at some of these games, you look at it's really tough to sort of kind of pick one, because now we're at that point in the season where even if it's not necessarily like for the climbing up the standings, now you're starting to look at how our computers going to look at some of these games when you're talking about now we're inching closer to postseason. And now a game that you're playing this week might have longer term ramifications for where you get seated when you get to D2. Maybe you're a team that's in D2, and we all know these coaches, it's a badge of honor to climb from D3 and to go and get seated in a D2, or be in D2 where you might have thought you were slotted and play your way into maybe getting into that D1 bracket, and vice versa, right? So when you look at Granada, this was a team that the last couple of years they've sort of been on the edge of open, just about, or sitting at the top of D1. But now, with how dynamics have changed, another loss or a loss to TAF, we're talking about, are they going to slide out of D1? Are they going to slide into D2 for this year? It's sort of difficult, because when you look at your standing in the top 25, obviously we focus on our teams here in the Valley, but there are teams on the other side of the city that are also sort of making waves that can kind of bump you up or down. And for a team like TAF, D3 is always, for that program, going to be a mark with that. That's the line of demarcation they don't want to end up in. They don't want to be a D3 team come playoff time. And a lot of times they're not going to be, but if you're going to be in D2, you want to sort of work your way into position. Maybe you can get that first game at home, and a win over Granada will definitely help being in the top half of D2. So these games have ramifications beyond just your league standing now. We're talking about playoff games too. And even for a team like Elko that struggled, you look competent against Birmingham, or maybe potentially wake up the ghost of 2017, and because we forget the last team that's beaten Birmingham. Now, it's been a long time ago. We are a bunch of senior classes removed from a team that did it. But the last team that beat Birmingham, and it was a shock when they did it at that point because of what Birmingham was building, was El Camino. So I don't know. Maybe there's some magic in the air. Those new uniforms, they look like a different team in the All Blacks. I hope they break them out for this game too. They looked amazing on Friday night against TAF. Maybe they try to conjure up that same magic. But I will say, a game, if I had to pick one, that I'm just looking forward to. It's Chavez. No, I'm joking. It's not Chavez. It is that Poly Verdugo game, because of the fact that, man, there seems to be a lot that can happen in terms of when we get to that final score of that game. It could say a lot about one of these two teams being in a position to be a host for a playoff matchup. And also, when you look at where these teams might fall, whoever wins this game, who knows? The way the brackets will fall might mean a rematch. We at least see a couple of them every year. A playoff game that ends up sort of being a rematch of a regular season matchup, and these two teams could find each other playing each other in the first or second round in the playoffs, and whoever won this game might determine who gets to host it. So that's where I'm sort of landing. Verdugo Poly is one that I'm kind of keeping a keen eye on. Can't wait to see how it all works out. So that's another episode in the books. We have a lot on the table for this week, and we are excited to bring it all to you. So, as always, like, subscribe, leave comments. We read them all. Hit that notification bell so you know when we put these episodes up, because, like you said, like we always tell you guys, we are always looking to bring you this content. We want to put these kids on the pedestal, and we see the coaches a word of appreciation to the coaches who get in our mentions when they want us to make sure that we are attributing scores and big plays to the right players. We see you. We are work in progress. We are doing everything we can. We got junior writers, and we're coaching them up as we go. But for myself, Kenny Hodges, and Arshavir Saryan, it's been another episode of ATV. We'll see you guys on the flip. Peace.